Good morning and welcome to the joint partnership webinar to inform the P&R profession and local government professionals about the new background check requirements. This is an joint effort between the North Carolina Recreation and Park Association and NC State University's Recreation Resources Service. My name is Scott Payne. I am one of the Recreation Resource Service consultants working in the Northeast area. And I'm joined today by Michelle Wells, the Executive Director of the North Carolina Recreation and Park Association. We'd like to welcome all of the local government park and recreation professionals, as well as their human resource peers and legal counsel. Our intent here is to share as much information on the new background check requirements for employees working in any capacity with children, information that we know. So our agenda for today is we're going to tell you what we know. We're going to talk through what does it mean. We're going to say what we are unsure about. We have some recommendations and we have some resources. And then we're going to open it up for questions and comments. We'll use the chat function in the Zoom app. So if you place your questions there, Dr. Charlene Smith from Recreation Resources Service will be monitoring. We will try to answer what we can, and we'll then try to find out answers to what we can't figure out at this time. This webinar is being recorded and will be stored on our Recreation Resources Service web resource for you to access, and we're going to share that in the resources section. So if you all are ready, we are going to go ahead and get started. So what do we know? Originally, there were two bills in the House. There was a House Bill number 162 entitled Local Government Applicants Criminal History Check that was entered into the House in February. That bill moved through the House, was approved after 3 readings, and sent over to the Senate to consider. And currently, there was another House Bill 612 entitled Fostering Care in North Carolina Act that was also moving through the House and the Senate. On June 5th, language from House Bill 162 was incorporated into House Bill 612. Which gave us this language that says, and to provide the counties and cities required criminal history record checks for applicants offered a position if the position requires the applicant to work with children in any capacity. That updated and amended House Bill 612 was ratified into Session Law 2025-16, signed into effect on June 26, 2025. So 2 bills, and again, they kind of got smushed together, and we have what we have now. So what does it mean? Summary of this is any and all county or municipal government applicants, if offered a position that works with children in any capacity, must be subject to a criminal background check by the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, SBI. North Carolina General Statutes authorizes SBI to provide a state and national criminal records check for local governments with the use of the potential employee's fingerprints. So that's what this new background check requirement is. You have to use the SBI's process to provide a state and national criminal records check using the potential employee's fingerprints. Session Law 2025-16 goes into effect October 1st, 2025, and that is next Wednesday. So what does it mean continued? Who will need to go through the process? Any individual that will work with children in any capacity, very broad definition, that has been tendered a conditional offer of employment, either full or part-time, will have to go through this process. What will the SBI need at minimum to conduct their background check? At minimum, they will need the applicant's fingerprints, and they will need a signed permission form from the applicant consenting to the background check. This applies to conditional offers of employment effective on October 1st, 2025 and after. It does not mean that you have to go back and run an SBI background check on your existing employees unless you have a position open as of October 1st, 2025, and an existing employee applies for that position and is selected, and that conditional offer selected to be that fill that position. If so, that employee will probably need to go through this process. This state law 2025-16 does not appear to include or cover unpaid volunteers. So what we're seeing is volunteers do not have to go through this process. Now, I'm going to pass it over to Michelle Wells, my colleague. She has spent some time in conversation with folks more closely associated, like SBI and others. So, Michelle, your turn.
Great. Thanks, Scott, and good morning, everyone. There are some things here just to share from conversations I have been able to have with the staff over at the SBI and their fingerprint division, and how it might impact each of you going through on this, and some key things they wanted to make sure that you knew. So the first thing they said that is most important is that you all know that the SBI only accepts electronic fingerprints from a law enforcement agency, and they do not accept them from third-party vendors. They did see the third-party vendors pop up during the pandemic who said they submit them electronically, and the answer is they do not. So if you are working with a third-party vendor, please know that that will not happen. Electronic fingerprints that are submitted through a law enforcement agency are received and ready for processing usually within 24 hours. Non-electronic fingerprints, that's what I would call where you take the ink, someone's finger on a piece of paper that has to be sent in and mailed or delivered to the SBI for processing. It can take 3 to 4 weeks just for that card with the information, the fingerprint on it, to be entered into the system. Once everything's in a system, it takes up to 2 weeks for it to be processed by the SBI. And as you will see on the slide here, the results are mailed via the U.S. Postal Service back to you. And for that, we'd have to say the time frame is unknown. Depends on how mail service runs in your area. We know there are some places where it's just not as reliable, and you can't say, yes, you're going to get it in 2 business days. The cost per person to do this new background check is going to be $38 per person on that one. There are more things we are unsure about on the next slide, Scott. And our list of unsures is fairly long, and we're going to probably add to this today based on things that are coming in through some of the questions you guys are having. How do you define from the law works with children? Can a person be offered a job, that has been offered a job, begin the work before the background check is received? Can you work with your local law enforcement agencies to expedite the local fingerprinting process? What criteria will be used to determine approval to work with children, and who sets that criteria? What is the Postal Service delivery time of background checks to your area? And how are those results handled once they are received locally within your local government? Next slide, Scott. Does a background check have to be repeated if they take a break in employment? So specifically thinking about your part-time employees who may work in the summer and then they come back and work, a different time. How do you handle that, and what impact might it have on your local payroll process? So working with your HR department to determine how that can be done. We have heard that there have been some instances where part-time employees were kept on payroll and they were not assigned work, that there were attempts to apply for unemployment. So is there a way or something you can do um, in your local government that helps keep them on payroll so they don't have to go back through the process, but yet takes care of other things out there? What about contractors, partner programs? Is it only for those who receive a W-2? Are 16 and 17-year-olds required to be fingerprinted? Do you have to get parental permission in order to do a fingerprint of a minor? How long is this background check valid for? What if an employee does take that break? How is that defined as when's an acceptable time? What is the impact on your hiring process and that schedule? We already seen that we're already adding probably at least a month to that by the time you add in the time to get it in the SBI system, get it processed and get it back to you. And then I'm sure none of you had this budgeted at $38 a person to be able to do for your full and part-time employees through the rest of this budget cycle that you're currently in. Next slide, Scott. So what are some recommendations? I've met with both representatives from the North Carolina League of Municipalities and the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, and they are talking as well with their constituents. And the main 2 points that are coming out of that is that every local government will have to make their own determination of how this law will be interpreted. And to me, that kind of takes us back to the days of the pandemic where everybody had to make the decision based on what their local community and local government had as far as a comfort level and risk tolerance to decide what guidelines you were going to follow and how, and what is that determination. They're also saying that everybody should be fingerprinted, including those who are under 18. There again, these are recommendations from these 2 organizations that most local governments here in North Carolina are a part of. So you may want to have these other conversations. Our next set of recommendations include creating a local team. That should include somebody from Parks and Recreation, somebody from your Human Resources Department, somebody from your legal team, somebody from your law enforcement agencies, and perhaps even someone from your city county management to talk about this, because it's going to have a broad impact across multiple um, uh, agencies within your local government on that. You have to define what the unacceptable offenses are if that's not already in place for your local government as far as the background checks that you're using. We're suggesting you've got to review those hiring timelines and adjust based on the information that we've just been able to provide you today. You're going to have to plan ahead. Suggest looking for efficiency opportunities. I've already seen a post in there about, can we work with our SBI or law enforcement to do the fingerprinting for us? Yes, that's a great idea. But can you say, hey, they're going to be at a certain location at our community center from these 2 times for people to come in and like mass get your fingerprints done to not only help you, but also to help your law enforcement or whoever's having to help process this. And just like during the pandemic, we're going to ask that you share so that we can all learn together through this process with what might be going on. And a lot of times it's like, well, what are my neighbors doing? How close do we need to model them? Because we know people see and hear across jurisdiction lines to go, hey, they're not doing this over here, but we're doing it here. And so just so everybody kind of can know on that, we're going to go back to that system we had during the pandemic where there's a form for you to put in your information, and then you'll be able to see the results as well to see what others are doing on that. And then obviously we want you to stay connected with RRS through the consultants that you have across the state, through NCRPA. Let us know about your process, what successes you might be finding, what challenges you have, because that's where we can help maybe sort out some of these things on a state level. I will tell you that NCRPA is already talking with other groups with how can we perhaps have some refinement of this process. Like, is it required by the SBI to snail mail these results back to you? And if it is, why is it a requirement? Is it because that's something that they've always done, or is it a legislative piece that says this is how they have to do it? So we want to partner with them. We've already kind of told them they're going to get slammed come first of the year, spring, March, April, with all of you submitting your information on that. And so we've got some resources out there. So our folks over at RS have created a great page on that. And so from that, you'll find this shared learning form and the results that you'll be able to access from there. We will also follow up with emails out to everybody in the state and also everybody who's on this call as well. And that's kind of where basic information that we have that we can just kind of keep you updating. So if you've put something in there and it changes, we want you to go in there and add the update so that it'll track chronologically what lessons you've learned as you've gone through that. Scott, we'll turn it over to you to talk about the other resources out there.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Yes, the shared learning forum from NCRPA, it probably will look familiar to some of you. It was the approach that the association did during COVID. Same thing here is sharing. If your community is figured out how you're going to make it work for this change for you, if you post that there, it'll end up in the results page and people can learn from each other. That's what makes it so powerful. Dr. Smith with the RS has created a landing page on the RS website where all of this information is going to be collected. Anything that we learn about this will be there. So there'll be one point for you to go to, including this webinar is being transcribed and will be available to review. We're going to send out the link to that page to everyone who registered for this webinar, so you'll have access to it. I also want to make sure, and we've shared this, but I just want to remind, if you haven't seen it, there was an excellent article by Christy Nicodurm at the UNC School of Government on this topic. She put this out on August 26th, and it really kind of was a very nice job of assembling a lot of the information into one area. So if you've not seen that, I'd encourage you to read it and share it with your colleagues. Michelle referenced this. I do want to remind folks that although our emphasis and focus has been on the local government park and recreation professionals, for your HR colleagues in the room, there may be other departments in your community that also offer, that may work with children in any capacity. Do some of your departments, like planning, do they have a paid internship for high school students? If so, this probably applies to them. So you have to think broadly about anything that your community does working with children in any capacity. So what we're going to do now is I am going to, if I can figure it out, we're going to stop the share. There we go. And we have had Dr. Smith and our colleagues have been tracking your questions. So Dr. Smith, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of facilitate that for us.
All right. Yeah. And as we were talking, I was adding a couple of links to our webpage on the based on some of the questions. So hopefully it's a little slow to save, but it's getting there. I dropped the link to our webpage in the chat if you can find it. We do have lots of questions. Let's see. One question I don't think we hit was, how do we handle out-of-state applicants that need to get fingerprinted?
That's going to be a great question. As Michelle has shared, SBI is only going to accept fingerprints coming from other law enforcement. So that might be a call to SBI to find out how they do that. And I'm sure that they have worked with this before. Many local governments have been fingerprinting like they're a law enforcement employee. So maybe they already have a process in place how to manage that.
Yep. So, Charlene, these are great questions, and I saw you've already set up a space on the webpage for FAQs. And so if folks will give us time to these that we don't know about, that we will compile, like, here's all the questions that go to SBI, and we will try to get those answered so that each of us are not having to call them and drive them crazy to start with in this process, but let us kind of be your clearinghouse for helping get as much information. And we will also email updates out to everyone as when we find things as well. So you won't just have to go check the website.
Yes, we want SBI to be our friends.
Yes.
Let's see. And I think you touched on if it's required for contracted instructors.
That I would say that has to be a local determination, whether you're going to instructors that you contract with. So in the terms of HR, it's people you give W-2s to. Are you going to do it for people you give 1099s to from that perspective? So I think that's each local government's going to have to make that decision based on what they feel is most appropriate for their community.
Okay. And we hit the part-time employees. So again, that's an applicant. Under 18, you talked about that. Was the other question on fingerprinting?
So
And that's a
I'll
big
add,
difference.
I'll
go
add
ahead.
one point to that, those that are under 18. And again, this is probably one of those questions that as your team that we recommend you form, it might be a question to the SBI. Do they have a template of a form that a parent could sign giving parental permission for someone under 18? So that's one of those things you also need to think about for that age group, less than 18.
And remember, this is only going forward. So anybody you have already hired, you don't have to go back. And the big difference on this again is the fingerprinting. You may have done background checks before, but this is a different level.
You know, and Charlene, before you go on, that brings up a good point as you're starting to look at people who may be in your system currently. From an HR perspective, have they been terminated? Or are they on pause, knowing that they may come back in the very near future? And so if you were able to keep them in your system and on payroll and they've been hired, the question would be is, do they have to have a fingerprint if they were hired before that date? There again, that's going to be something your local community needs to make that determination on where they feel most comfortable.
And following
ahead.
up a little bit, Charlene, the park and recreation profession has been doing background checks for decades. What this law changes is now made a statutory requirement how you have to do it. And it includes these steps that we may not have been doing before. So that's one of the biggest changes. It's now statutorily requires you to do SBI, go through SBI to do it.
Okay, we have a couple questions on the what does it mean working with youth? The gray area which we have addressed. So, questions about public works employees that happen to be going by, working on the playground, maintenance in the
that is
rec
where,
center.
as Michelle was stating in the recommendation, is that each community and that team that we mentioned forming is going to have to reach their definition of what that means for them. We've talked to a few folks. One has said their community is going to be every park and recreation employee, full and part-time, period. They're doing it that way, right? So that's the definition they've made for who may work with children in any capacity. It may vary. That's why we're asking NCRPA has created this form, share what you're doing so we can get that information out for others to see how it's being approached.
Yeah, and Charlene, I've asked myself, right? So you have a lifeguard who's sitting on the stand who is there monitoring the pool, would only have interaction perhaps if there were an incident in their time on the stand. Is that someone who's working with children? Obviously, the person who's teaching swim lessons is working with children. And that's where there's just going to be a lot of gray areas. And I've seen some of them pop through, right? So is it the person who drives the bus for a summer camp or after school field trip? Are they required to be fingerprinted as your bus driver or transportation provider if it's an employee? Somebody asked about custodial staff. And there again, we can't stress it enough. Those things have to be your local determination with what the risk and comfort level is within your own community.
And the other piece of this is, we talked about youth. What do you consider children? Is it 12 and under, 18 and under? Again, lack of specificity.
Yeah, the law does not provide any of those definitions for that.
Okay, and then the next question was kind of on the or a group of questions with the electronic versus the fingerprint cards that are mailed? Does that go, who is the information sent back to? Is it the Park and Recreation Department, the local government agency, the law enforcement agency?
Right. So Charlene, I think the answer to that may be each local government's going to have an account with the SBI. They are probably already have one, I'm assuming, because they have other employees who are doing this. And it should be coming back, I would think, to the people who are the contact there. So like, what's your process if it comes back to your local law enforcement office? Do they then turn it over to HR? Does HR, or does it go straight to Parks and Recreation to decide? And then what information is coming back? But we will follow up on that question. Let's put that on our list of, let's get some more details kind of their process of all of that. Because if you all don't need to create an account, I think you'll be, if you can, obviously your best way is going to be able to work with your local law enforcement, get them electronically submitted to just expedite the first process to start with. And then I would say if there's an opportunity for us to make any process efficiencies, it's going to first start with information back to law enforcement. So my recommendation would be try to work with them initially versus setting up your own account and trying to figure out how to do it yourself.
Yeah, I think your HR team, and it was really nice to see there are a number of them registered today.
Mhm.
I think your HR partners will be really critical of that because the
What they
onboarding,
do.
recruitment, all that process is their strength. So working again as that part of that team, how that works. I'll add one little note to scribble down here, and this is a question that you probably should be asked to SBI. We will ask it as well. That is there a additional security concern if you're taking hard copy cards, fingerprint cards, how you store them, are they locked under lock and key, that kind of thing. What happens once the applicant's passed or not. So that's just something you need to think about because that is a vital piece of personal information that should fall under those levels of protections.
Okay. And I did add links on the webpage for the SBI fingerprinting information that kind of describes what the electronic options are. And then from that page, there was a link that I added to the national background information. So that's at the national level. And it's the webpage that lists fingerprinting locations in North Carolina. So where those are, and you can kind of drill down by county and see what agencies are there. And I'm not sure, you might need to dig down to see if they do the electronic, or I think they called it scanning, fingerprint scanning.
Yeah. And Charlene, I saw a question scroll through about somebody said if an applicant was out of state, that might be, you may be able to find a location in their state that they could go and submit their fingerprint and have it directed to North Carolina under your account to get it back to you.
Yeah.
So a couple of things along those lines. Somebody in the comments pointed out that police agencies may also charge for fingerprinting. So again, this comes where it's important to work with your local group to see if the county charges you, the county sheriff's office charges you, or whoever that may be. Also with the out-of-state stuff, if you're hiring your college students back, your college students that are out of state and coming home for the summer, you need to think through the timeline of that. And as you well know, college students' timelines, which is its own thing. So, there's a lot of figuring out to do on that local level. So that committee that Scott keeps pointing to, I think it's going to become really important.
Michelle, there's
certainly the timeline if you have out-of-state applicants or people who have lived a lot of different places. If you've done background checks, that takes a little bit longer. So,
Michelle, there's a question in here. Is that you may be able to respond to? Is the SBI staffed up to handle this increase?
So I think the answer to that is probably no. And so in my conversation with with them, I asked, were there any additional positions funded through the budgetary process that enabled them to be able to handle this additional work? And I already knew the answer, but they confirmed that no, there were not. And then they also did confirm that they had a number of vacant positions that, due to the current budget situation, they did not know if those would be filled. That is where we're still working on those things. So yes, you guys are going to start hiring some people, come October 1 for some of your fall programs, things like that. We really know the big influx from Parks and Recreation perspective is going to be in the spring. So that's where we're still hoping to work with the SBI, work from a legislative perspective to see if we can make sure that they are ready for all that's going to roll in there from each of you.
And Michelle, I believe, I can't remember if you touched on, we've been talking about this for so long. If there are outside companies that say they can come in and do all this, they can't, correct?
That's right. They can
Yeah.
take your fingerprints, but they
Mhm.
cannot submit them electronically. So that is that 3 to 4 week time frame once they send the fingerprint cards to the SBI to even get in the system to get the about 2 week processing time that it takes to run the actual background check. So I would also say look at I know some of you already have contracts with companies who are doing background checks for you. They may say, hey, we can tack this on. Well, what's it going to cost? Or is it time to break that contract with them because you're going to have to go through this or make some type of adjustment that some employees can probably just still go through a regular background check you may already be doing. Others are going to have to go through this legislative process for their background check.
Yeah, so I would say just be cautious of
Yes.
contracting with somebody to do this for you. Make sure
Absolutely.
the fingerprints will count according to the SBI.
That's right.
They're, so the question list of law enforcement agencies that do digital scans, and that's on that resource page. Sheila asked that. Also had a good question. Is there a mobile scanning technology that can travel to us for hiring events? Good business opportunity there.
Yeah, that is a question for your local law enforcement. I mean, I
Yeah.
just can't emphasize enough how much we are encouraging each of you to work with your local law enforcement on this, because it's now mandated and they are going to be your quickest avenue to get these things back. So when we talked about, are there efficiencies to help make their job easier? Can you say, hey, can you come to our hiring event that they may be able to bring there, and whether it's mobile or not, Sheila, or just something they can set up so that you have that people are coming to a common place, or you're setting up a common time for people to go to their location to get some of these scans done to expedite the process.
Yeah, then we have a group of questions on municipalities sharing cost of fingerprint fees. So just, yeah, talking to your neighbors, other folks in your county or city nearby. And then the question, did the state say anything about providing financial resources to local governments, since this will be a huge impact on all budgets? No, they're not good at funding what
Yeah,
they mandate all the time. So
yep, this is a unfunded mandate, Charlene. So there are no state funds currently to help cover this cost. And what I may do is go in there on our form that a lot of you are filling out and ask you to kind of give us a ballpark estimate of how many people you think a year you're going to have to run through this based on, past hiring, et cetera, so that we can kind of get what is that dollar figure statewide.
yeah, and Scott's put a comment to a question about the other states that might have this process in place. And Scott, you're researching the state of Florida and their state-supported background check clearinghouse.
Yeah,
So we will let you know.
Michelle found that, so we're trying to research a little more about how it got together, how it was created, and what all it's doing. Yeah.
Yep. And that's one of those conversations that obviously we want to roll in and have a discussion with the SBI, right? What is the benefit? Because they are the key holder and provider of the information. And can some type of clearinghouse be set up that says, and a great example is in the state of Florida, volunteers have to be fingerprinted. as well. So in their case, let's say they have a law enforcement officer who has been fingerprinted through the system, but decides to now be a volunteer coach in their community. They're able to go in there and kind of say, now run this person based on the criteria for this specifics of being the volunteer coach. And instead of the initial fee of, it's in our case of $38, I think it's like $10 or $12 that they're able to recheck someone. And another beauty of that is their system is also set up that if I was an employee of yours and I had passed the background fingerprint check, and then a couple of weeks from now, I do something stupid that says maybe I do no longer meet the criteria. The person I chatted with there said, yeah, your boss would probably know about your act of stupidity before you got back to work on Monday morning as well, to be able to talk about it. So it has an alert system that says, hey, we know Michelle is doing this. And so she did this bad thing over the weekend, and now it impacts my ability to work. And so one of the other questions that as Charlene said, we've been talking about it. So some of the questions we've had is, how do you handle departure staff during summer camp? It all happens. Somebody says, I'm tired of this. I don't like this anymore. I have to go back to school early. My family's moving. How are you going to be able to be prepared as a local department to be able to continue offering summer camp with the staff to participant ratio that you need when it takes perhaps a month to get someone fingerprinted, background checked in the system? Do you overhire? Do you what's your contingency plan for those things? So there's lots of parts and pieces for y'all to think about and consider as you're working on it locally.
And someone did ask, can you use a criminal background check on a potential employee who has already had that check done? So like if they've had the check before, can you use it, or how do you get that? And I think it would be
I
the
think that's a
recency.
question we'll need to ask the SBI, Charlene, because if somebody's fingerprints are already in there, right now I don't know that they have a way that you can say, oh, I want to check Michelle and here's her information, and it would tell you without me being fingerprinted again. But we will ask that question of them. This is where we
We
would
don't
hope.
know what Michelle's been doing in the meantime.
We don't know what I've been
Out
doing in the meantime, right? So that's
Secretly
where we really
camping in
hope.
campgrounds across the state doing who knows.
That's right. So that's where we really hope a larger registry type system would make those things easier, right? You can go in there and type in the right information and find out that, yes, I am in the system, and yes, I'm still cleared to work on this.
Okay. And someone did comment from a law enforcement perspective, it usually takes, we see returns of fingerprint checks on applicants within 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And Monique, I see your question about the listserv. If you're registered for this, you're going to be on our listserv, so we're good there.
Yeah.
Shana asked if there's House Bill 315 is already in place for fire chiefs to fingerprint candidates for employment. Those results are typically kept by the fire chief. So that was another.
Yeah, I think at the local level, that House bill had been in place, and local governments were already being required to go through the SBI process, including fingerprinting for their life safety, their law enforcement and fire. So many communities have some experience with it. It's just not at this probably ongoing volume that they'll see with adding in, especially the seasonal spike. I think that's where there's going to be some tension on how to hammer through this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Josh Watson from the town's police department, how they can help. Is there a standardized waiver for applicants, and how does the SBI collect the $38 fee? It's been my question. The fee.
We'll ask that question. We don't know how it's, I don't know how they currently collect it.
Yeah.
So that I'm sure there's a system.
There's folks that have commented back in the comments, saying that it looks like maybe a monthly bill is what other folks are saying. From SBI that's going to whoever holds the account, whichever HR or whomever holds the account.
Gotcha. Thanks, Trey.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, someone said you require guest speakers. Again, it's an applicant. So if they're applying for a job. So if you just have a guest speaker come in, that's not something you would have to do a background check. Let's see, Travis, I think we've answered that on the how you pay for it. Let me know if there's anything else I'm missing there. Someone says the results should not go to Parks and Rec, but to the HR department. So
Right.
yeah, that's the best place to
Yep.
coordinate everything.
I do think Tasha's comment at 9:29, if you're tracking the comments about
Yeah.
how, at least in New Hanover County, in that area, they traditionally do not do background checks or fingerprints for new hires outside of law enforcement.
Right.
So again, you need to sit down with those folks and figure out, how those changes need to happen.
Yeah, this, to Trey's point, if anyone you hire works in any capacity with children, this new background check law applies.
Right.
I do see one in here at 927. I briefly mentioned it, and we don't know enough about it, and that is the discussion of storage of the records. How important it's going to be to store this information, and the SBI may have some requirements in their agreement form to that. So that's something that we also all have to research. What is that requirement for safe storage to satisfy the SBI of this information?
Yeah, and Nicole Sweat mentioned that you need to make sure your municipality has a signed and approved non-criminal justice access agreement before you can get it approved to even request an SBI background check.
Right.
Some folks said it took them a couple of days. Others said a week to do that. And somebody said, Nicole, 2 weeks. And then how often does it need to be completed? If you're hiring an employee that has previously been fingerprinted, and then someone mentioned like a promotion. Sometimes when you get a promotion, you're in a new position, HR does another background check. So
Right.
let's see.
Another good question was along the lines of, like, say, umpires or somebody like that that's working in multiple counties. Does each county or each agency need to do a background check? I don't know if we know the answer to that question, but it is an interesting question.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. I did see that one. And again, it gets back to your definition of an employee or as an independent contractor,
Yeah.
and how your community is going to choose to do that. So it may be, if it's an employee, considered an employee, they receive a W-2, this process may apply. If they're independent contractor, I think it's a choice on whether you want to apply it or not, because an independent contractor would probably, the HR folks can really stand up here, independent contractor who's paid through a 1099 is probably not considered an employee.
And so Trey, I think that also there's a good question, right? So we know there's a HR Professionals Association, just like there's the Park and Rec Association, and Fire and Police have theirs as well. Is there some collaboration amongst the HR community to say, for an umpire to say, yes, I also I had my background check completed in the neighboring county or municipality. Are they willing to share that information to say, yes, they were approved here, therefore you can instantly hire that person based on a criteria?
I think with that, you would have to have whoever's fingerprints they are would have to have permission to share, kind of like HIPAA.
Yes,
We
exactly.
need to do that. And Virginia Jones indicated that you will need to certify that you will keep all data confidential and acknowledge that you will have the data available should the agency be audited. So
yeah,
all that data safety and security.
Another thought that would be interesting. Hi, Brittany, Southeast
Brittany.
Region Consultant. Just thinking through from the kind of summer camp and counselor perspective and how much crossover there is with educators or school system employees, and even volunteers in the school system have to be at least in the county where I am, have to be fingerprinted and go through a background screening process with the county. It would be interesting to know what other county agencies that do electronic fingerprinting, is everyone filtering through the SBI, or are they doing that through a different system? Like if you're fingerprinted with the county to be a county employee, do they submit theirs to the SBI? Just to know. So if there is an opportunity for those to kind of carry over from one agency to another, you would be able to verify that you were fingerprinted and it did go through the SBI.
Yeah, we'll have to, that's a good
Just a
point
thought.
on
Yeah, Brittany,
collaboration.
even one of the questions we had is, are teachers and educators in the school system, are they considered local government employees, or are they considered state employees? Because
Right.
this guideline only references local government employees.
Right. Just
Yeah.
wondering if you can get like a golden ticket that you've
Mhm.
been SBI fingerprinted, just perhaps not by the agency you're applying to. And
Right.
again, that'll boil down to the policies of the local government agencies too. But it was just a thought I had.
Definitely. Thanks.
Okay. Sheila wants to know what it costs to purchase an electronic fingerprint scanning equipment and software, which was answered. Depends on the equipment and packages, between $6,800 and $12,000 for the equipment. Then you have maintenance and all that. So
And maybe that's a partnership opportunity if your local law enforcement does not have that. Maybe you can provide it for them, assuming that meets whatever SBI requirements and specifications, and in return, they process your fingerprints electronically. So it's all about thinking. That's good. It's thinking outside the box. How can we work through this process?
all right, let's see. Keisha says City of Orlando has this process in place. Talked about the interview process, or do you ask somebody comfortable with criminal background? I think usually when you fill out applications, there's check boxes on there that you will do that. Let's see. Chandra asked if there's anything prohibiting us from converting the results we receive in the mail. So if they do the fingerprint cards to an electronic copy for storage, if we maintain the same security provisions. I would think so. I mean, it's just part of your data security and storage process, but I would check that with your local government to confirm. Okay.
I would suggest that whatever your HR process department is doing, that you mirror that for consistency of record storage, records retention.
Yeah, and Jess Miller asked about what we've been talking about. If you have sport official that works in multiple counties, they're going to go across jurisdictions. I would not think you'd need it for both counties, but it's something we need to figure out how to get. I'm thinking logic, Scott. I see your hands up there.
Exactly. So Charlotte, I'm seeing a lot of things pop in the box, the chat box, about the access agreements and everything with the SBI. And so I would just advise everybody, before you start filling those out, you really need to have these conversations with your local team, because your organization, your municipality, town, county may already have this in place and you're duplicating efforts. So figure out whether it's, hey, we have access, we can add 3 people to it to help, or do you have to have that? So it's new to a lot of us. So ask those questions, and we hope we're giving you information on questions to ask, to say, does our county or our local government have this already in place? And how do we roll Parks and Recreation into the process?
Yeah, this is redundant, but I think it's really important, and that's why Michelle presented it. That getting that team together, you have your HR professionals, they do this. Right. You're working with them so to make sure they understand the volume, right, that you're going to be facing from the Park and Recreation side. Your legal counsel will be there to help you guide the employee law side. What are the decisions we accept for what's an acceptable misbehavior that's adjudicated by someone that if it comes back. All of that, you got to really dig in with that team. You have a little time before the peak rush of recruitment to do that, but really rely on your existing infrastructure to help.
Michelle,
Yeah, HR folks are the experts, so use their expertise.
Michelle, William asked a really good question about feedback to the state legislature or the sponsors, co-sponsors of this bill. I don't know if you can answer that or not, but has feedback been given, and is there any response to that question?
Sure, Trey. So from NCRPA's perspective and from my conversations as well with the league and the County Commissioners Association, we are not going to try to dispute or have Parks and Recreation removed from this. It is a good thing that we are taking the safety of children in our programs to the highest level. And so we will not be asking for an exemption from this. What we will be focusing our energies on is this process. Can we help make sure that the SBI is prepared? Can we help make sure the SBI is able to expedite information transfer to them and from them back to you? Can we talk about some potential funding sources to help cover these additional costs? So those are ways that NCRPA is going to move forward from here from a legislative perspective.
Great, thanks. Austin asked about conducting the background check first to eliminate unacceptable applicants before proceeding with fingerprinting.
Nope.
I don't think you proceed with fingerprinting until you offer the job.
Yeah, you really shouldn't be using that as a screening mechanism, and I think your HR people would tell you that. Also, there's a $38 cost. So if you don't only incur that with the candidate you want to hire, that's the person, that's your top candidate. You can make conditional offer. Then you have that $38 cost. But do not do that as a screening mechanism for all.
Yeah, because we mentioned applicants for jobs, and that's usually that criteria for it to be eligible for you to use this requirement, but you don't actually do it until the job offer.
Right.
That makes sense. Let's see. What else we have? Trey's been helping me out here about billing monthly. If you retire and wish to return as a volunteer with children, like coaching, do you have to go through the process when they already have your background on file? I would think so.
Yeah.
So
So
volunteers
currently-
are different.
Yeah. So yeah, currently the law does not require volunteers to be background checked through this fingerprinting process.
Mhm. And some folks already do this for coaches, I think.
Towards the bottom of the comments, there's a fair number of discussion around fingerprinting minors. And so I would encourage you to look at those comments. I'm certainly not an expert in that area, but they're good questions, and you need to be working with law enforcement and HR folks around how you're fingerprinting minors. I know we discussed that earlier, but just reinforce that.
Yeah. And we will also take this same information that we are seeing and hearing from the collective group today. And as Scott said, it's great to have those support services from HR and legal and other administrators on the call with us today, because it may be some conversations with both the league and the County Commissioners Association, because we are all learning this together. And so right now, as of the other week, their recommendation was, yes, anyone under 18 should also be fingerprinted. Based on what we continue to learn, that may change. And if it does, we will certainly put that out there to everybody.
Yeah, and a lot of information on who is authorized. I would, again, talk with your HR department. You probably already have folks in the system on that. Felicia asks, aren't youth records for those under 18 sealed, or will the SBI finger process reveal things?
That's a question we'll have to ask Felicia. I don't know if it will be you'll get just a yes or no back if it were to be a minor, or what details they'll be providing specifically.
Yeah. Laura says you cannot conduct any checks like drug motor vehicle until you make a conditional offer. So again, that's like when you've offered somebody the position, and usually that is contingent on the results of the background check.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I think
So
some
Charlene,
folks
there's a
good
great,
hints.
Laura Turk just posted in there about reminder to all the HR staff to look at your job postings to make sure that you're including all this criteria and, drug testing, et cetera. And even though where it says, background checks, it may even need to say specifically fingerprint background checks.
Yeah.
So that people know. And somebody asked the question about, would you use this as a screening process? I have a feeling, Scott answered it no, right? But I have a feeling when you say, hey, I'd like to offer you this job and it requires you to be fingerprinted, I'm not going to show up, or I'm going to start ghosting you, or I'm just going to outright tell you, say, yeah, this is probably not the best job for me right now. So I think you'll find those cost savings based on people's just perhaps integrity of realizing, yeah, I can't pass it, so I'm not even going to go through the process.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be one of those policies where they have X number of days to do that. And then
Yep.
they may self-select that they're not going to be your candidate.
Correct.
But matching up to one of our HR attendees here, make sure that, your policies are going to have to modify now what you're saying on, you're posting what you're going to do. All of that has to be in sync.
Okay, I just dropped the webpage in again, and we'll continue to update that with frequently asked questions. I can share the screen maybe if it shows up here. All right. Do y'all see the correct page, Scott?
Yep. Yes.
Got too many monitors going here. But yeah, so we've started, here's the legislation on here, the Cannon Coats, the blog that several people mentioned. It's got a lot of details. So go in, read that, and it explains a lot of information. This is the SBI fingerprinting information webpage. And then from that, we also link this, that might not have switched pages for you the way I shared.
It did.
Okay. So yeah, so you can go in and check where to do it, and I would contact the locals to make sure are they doing electronic. We will have the recording linked here. It'll be on our YouTube, but I'll add the link here once we have this recording finished. We'll add resources and FAQs as we prepare those. And then Michelle has put up this shared learning survey. So basically this is looking at what are your local guidelines? How many background checks do you estimate doing each fiscal year? Some of those questions. And then the next link, once we get that information, you'll be able to view the results and see what other folks.
So Charlene, if you want to click on the results, we do have one. I had somebody go in there and
Okay.
repopulated already.
Okay.
So
All
you
right,
can
Maria.
do that.
Thanks,
So you should be
Maria.
able to use a search feature to go in there if you're looking for a specific municipality or something based on date, but we'll keep these with the newest on top as they come in.
All right. Great.
And there's been several requests to post the slide deck as well as a PDF, so that can be shared. So if we could do that as well, Charlene.
Yes, we will.
Yep.
Thanks.
And I hope we'll be able to go through all these questions that have come in through the chat box and use these to provide some answers to the FAQ section. And then I just can't request enough from each of you as to stay in touch with Scott and myself. We're going to kind of be driving this from our perspective, is to let us know what you're doing, where your pinch points are, what if you found a secret to success. Our profession is great about sharing, and we want to make sure that everybody has as much information as possible as we just learn from each other and figure out what it is we can do best to help each other as we navigate this new process that we're going to have going forward.
Yeah, and thank everybody for your questions and your input and sharing your expertise back with us.
Perfect.
Nick, we'll get back to recreating pretty soon.
Well, folks, we have reached our hour. We again, as Dr. Smith and Michelle said, thank you all for participating. The shared information in the chat was wonderful. It's also great to have our HR colleagues and our legal, and some sounds like we had some law enforcement with us as well. You're going to be able to build great teams talking about this back in your communities, making sure how it's going to work for you. We just ask that you please share that so that we can share it with everyone else. So on behalf of Recreation Resources Service and North Carolina Recreation and Park Association, we thank you for participating in our webinar. Have a good day.